So while it is no secret that the Wii U is selling horribly with their numbers coming in at 160K for 3 months worldwide, it's not a secret that the Wii U was selling horribly. But when we start getting comments like this and numerous articles like these, this is where people need to shut up. They just need to shut up because they don't know nothing about anything. So this is where I come in. This is what I think, and this is how I feel. If you don't agree, oh well, sucks for you. But this is all gonna be, well, not all of it, but most of this is gonna be facts, and some of it will be my personal opinions. But on the most, for the most part, they will be facts. So without further ado, let's start. Hello everybody, this is Macintosh2221 doing a rant because of stupid people, basically. So before I start this video, I'm going to start going into detail. I'm going to do a little history update or something. I can't update history, but whatever. Nintendo and Sega, two of the greatest video game makers of all time. There's no disputing that. There's no way you can't dispute it at all. There's no way. SNES versus the Genesis, greatest time in gaming, and we will never have anything like that again. Never. So they're doing their own thing. They clash. After they clash, things start to get Nintendo goes on to make the Wii U while Sega stops at the Dreamcast. So why did Sega stop at the Dreamcast? Because of failed systems that they had since the Genesis. Why did Nintendo go on to make the Wii U? Because of successful systems they had since the SNES. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Nintendo has not had any failed attachments, add-on systems. I'm not going to sit here and say that because they did have their fair share of failures. But it was not to the degree of Sega's failures. And this is what I mean. I'm going to start from the Genesis and the SNES until now, basically. So that's how I'm going to do this. So let's go. Alright, so the Sega Genesis. Yeah, I was about to say Sony. Sega's 4th generation console. Notoriously known for its war with the SNES. Now, this console, it has sold estimated from 37.4 to over 41.9 million consoles. That is a success, given that period of time when gaming wasn't really that big to begin with. It wasn't that big, but there was still a lot. It was big, but it wasn't big. It wasn't as big as it is now, but it was decently sized. Alright, so from there, after, during all the war with SNES, Sega releases the Sega CD. And this is where Sega started to mess up. Because Sega CD only sold 1.5 million to 6 million units out of the 31.4 to 41.9 million Genesis, whatever. So they had a quote-unquote failed attachment to their successful Genesis. Alright? So that's one failure that they had. Alright? So now we move on to the 32X, another attachment to the Sega Genesis. This thing was a disaster. It was a disaster. Only sold 665,000 units. That is terrible, considering 37.4 to 41.9 Genesis sold. So there we go. 2 failed add-ons. That's 2 failed add-ons in a row. Alright? And then we come to the Sega Saturn, which it did decently, but nowhere near the sales of the Sega Genesis, which in turn could possibly make that a failure. It only sold 9.4 million consoles. That's not even touching the Genesis sales. And I'm not sure if the Saturn had any attachments to it, but I don't think they did. So if they did, then they're not going to be shown on here or whatever. And I also forgot to mention that this is Sega's 5th generation console. Alright? So after 3 straight failures, they release their 6th generation and their final generation console, the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was pirate heaven. You did not have to buy games from anywhere. You could pirate it off the internet and play it straight on your Dreamcast. This is where the Dreamcast failed. While it did sell 10.60 million units, no developer in their right mind will want to develop for it because it was pirate heaven. If they develop for it, they will lose a crap ton of money. So this is where Sega just failed completely and they stopped making consoles. The Dreamcast is the main reason why they stopped, because they lost a lot of money on not only their games, but on the system as well. And the royalty fees that they were not getting because of developers not putting games on the Dreamcast because of it was pirate heaven. Alright. So now let's look at the Nintendo side of things, and I actually forgot to pull up the SNES, so let me go ahead and grab that right now. Alright, so now we move on to the Nintendo side of things with the SNES, Nintendo's 4th generation console. Now this thing was in the war with the Sega Genesis. The Super Nintendo has sold 49.10 million units. That's pretty good considering that, you know, gaming wasn't as big in the 90s. So they're you know, on this they're pretty much on this rampage right now. After the success of the NES, so they bring that success of the NES over to the SNES, and they're on a rampage, and Sega is trying to stop that rampage and all that. So I know that I know that the SNES did have the add-on. I think it was the Philips CDI, I think. If I'm wrong, then sorry, but I don't know how much that sold, but I don't think it sold much. So I'm gonna count that as part of a failure for that. So then Nintendo releases this fail of a console that nobody speaks of because it was just so bad. It was so bad. Oh, this was just bad. They release the Virtual Boy, their 5th generation console, and needless to say, this thing was a disaster. It only sold 770,000 units. It caused people to just, their eyesight was just totally messed up. This was Nintendo's first try at 3D technology, and this was a disaster. I'm pretty sure Nintendo got so many lawsuits for this console. It was a disaster. This is a complete fail on Nintendo's part. No, we don't even speak of this console anymore. So this was a fail. I'm gonna call this as 2 fails. This is the second fail for Nintendo. Alright. So now on to the Nintendo 64. Their replacement 5th generation console. This thing was great. This was a great console. This was a great selling console at that. Unlike Sega's 5th generation console, the Sega Saturn. This console sold 32.93 million consoles. The only thing that you could even remotely count as a fail on Nintendo's part for this was using cartridges. And even then, it wasn't even that big of a deal. So, this was a success. This was successful. Nintendo ends their streak of failed consoles. But then, we get on to the add-on to the Nintendo 64, the 64 disc drive, aka the 64 DD. This thing was a failure. So, after Nintendo realizes that, oh, we really messed up making this cartridge based, we're going to make an add-on so they can play discs, optical discs. Needless to say, this was nowhere near success. It only sold 15,000 units. And as it even says up here, it was a commercial failure and was never released outside of Japan. This was a failure. This was their in terms of sales, this was their biggest failure. So this is failure number 3 on their part. So then we go on to the GameCube, Nintendo's 6th generation console. And this could be considered a failure also. I don't know, because the main reason why this console only sold 21.74 million units. But this could be contributed to, there was 4 consoles on the market at the time. Sony was hauling, and I wanted to keep this PG, but this is just no. Sony was hauling ass. They were hauling ass with the PS2, the highest selling console of all time. Everybody was buying the PS2. Nobody was buying a GameCube, original Xbox, or a Dreamcast. So the GameCube's quote-unquote failure is contributed, and it is the cause of the PS2's success. So failure number 4, maybe? I don't know, but it could be counted as a failure. But this is where things for Nintendo turns around, unlike it turned around for Sega. The Nintendo DS. I don't know what generation of handhelds this was, but this thing sold crazy well. And Nintendo is the best at making handhelds. Nobody's touching Nintendo in the handheld division at all. Nobody. So things turn around for Nintendo, and as of 6/30/2013, the Nintendo DS has sold 153.93 million units. That is a success. That is a huge turnaround for Nintendo. A huge turnaround. Not to mention, I'm pretty sure the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, all that, I know those sold crazy well also. So Nintendo, while they were failing in the console division, they were highly successful during the handheld. They were beasts. Nobody was touching them. The Sega Game Gear, all the other portable handhelds that they had that was stronger than the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color and all that, nobody was touching it. So this is where Nintendo's consoles start to make a turnaround. The Nintendo Wii, Nintendo's 6th generation console. This thing was must-have. If you didn't have it, nobody knew what was wrong with you. You needed to have this system. Everybody and their mamas and their grandmas and everybody had a Wii. And as of June 30th, this console broke 100 million units shipped. That is crazy good. To go from 21 million to 100 million in just one generation, that is just phenomenal. This is where Nintendo just completely and utterly turns around in the console division. Nintendo turns around, they're selling, and not to mention every Wii was profitable. So they wasn't taking any losses on any Wii from day one. This console was profitable since day one. So, bam, big, huge success. This was a global phenomenon. It was a global phenomenon. Just how the PS2 was a global phenomenon for the 6th generation, this was a global phenomenon for the 7th generation. So now, we go into the Nintendo DS, which is selling good. This console is selling good. It is, I think they said it's about above the pace of the DS when it was selling. So this console is selling good. Yes, it had a rough start, and yes, it was overpriced, but Nintendo fixed that with games. Games sell systems. I don't understand why people do not understand that. Games sell systems. Specs don't sell systems, or at least they're not supposed to. Anybody who bases their console decision on specs is stupid. You don't play specs, you play games. So Nintendo turns this around, they bring games to the 3DS, they cut the price by over $100. No, not over $100, over $50. And it just turns into a huge success. It is now affordable and now has must-have games. It's done. Everything is A-okay with Nintendo. So now we go into the Wii U, and as I stated in the beginning of the video, yes, this console is at the moment, it's failing right now. It only sold 160,000 units within 3 months. That is terrible. That is just horrible. There's no excuse. There's nothing. The only excuse that you could possibly say for this is that there is no games. And even then, that is partly Nintendo's fault, because if they would actually go to third parties, help third parties learn how to use the Wii U's power, and stop making their consoles just for like them and make the consoles for everybody. Now, I'm not gonna say specs don't matter at all. They matter, but they're not the main point. But when developers do not have the proper tools at hand, they can't do anything with it. So Nintendo, the Wii U, this is, as of now, it is shaping up to be a failure. But it's really too hard for you to say this, because it's only been out for 7-8 months. So anybody who calls this a failure without any of the big Nintendo titles coming out from now till next year, and I'm gonna list those off too. Pikmin 3 just came out 2 days ago in the US. So Pikmin 3, Wonderful 101 in September. Wind Waker HD and Sonic Lost World in October. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze in November. Super Mario 3D World, and regardless of what you think about it, it's a Mario game. It's going to sell. It's going to sell units. It's going to sell a lot. It's going to help the Wii U a lot. So you got that. Those are all in just this year. And then next year we got Miyamoto's new IP, which we don't know anything about yet. We got Mario Kart 8, and we got Smash Brothers. Mario Kart 8 and Smash Brothers, those move units. They move units. Anybody who tells you that they don't is just retarded and a blind fanboy. They move units, people. So you can't even call the Wii U a failure yet. And now let all these games come out and they're still selling 160,000 units in 3 months. Then, bam, commercial failure. Stop production of the Wii U. Create a new console to compete with the PS4 and Xbox One. Specs wise, because that's really what is really killing the Wii U right now, is the specs and the games, but mostly the specs. And I don't know, but there we go. So for people to say that Nintendo is the new Sega, or Nintendo needs to go the way of Sega is completely retarded, and they're talking out of their asses because it makes no sense. They see the Dreamcast as a failure, so they think that, oh, Nintendo puts out a quote-unquote fail-level console. Oh, they're going to be the next Dreamcast. Whatever next console Nintendo puts out, there's going to be the next Dreamcast. Whatever system that Nintendo doesn't so good at, they're going to be the next Sega. No. This has been going on since since the GameCube. At the end of the GameCube's life cycle, this has been going on since then. Nintendo should drop out of the console business and go third party. Oh, the 3DS is not selling so good? Oh, they just drop out and become third party. The DS, 2 screens, that's gonna be a failure. Go third party, Nintendo. Oh, the Wii, that is weak compared to them. It's a glorified GameCube. Oh, just go third party, Nintendo. You don't know what you're doing with your hardware. They clearly know what they're doing with the hardware. Clearly they're selling these units. They're selling these consoles. They're selling these handhelds. They're selling these games. And they're making a profit off of them. They have so much money in the bank due to the success of the Wii and the DS. I don't see how anybody can call Nintendo a failure after they come off a successful generation. They come off generation after generation of the Wii and the DS and now the 3DS. I don't get it. Mind is blown. Why people are stupid, I don't know. But this more of the story is just shut up about Nintendo going the route of Sega. Just shut up, because it's retarded for you to say that they're gonna go the way of Sega just because they release one console that is not selling well after the success of the Wii. Knowing that the Wii was a global phenomenon, knowing that the Wii was profitable since day one for Nintendo, knowing that Nintendo has $11 billion in the bank, shut up. It's stupid. That's it. I'm done. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this rant / informative video, because apparently this is what people need so people can shut the hell up about Nintendo. And this is it. So I'll see you guys later. Peace. So how ironic is it that after I finish that rant, while I'm editing, one of my friends, Silent Gamer 524, retweets this. Nintendo says it has sold over 650 million consoles in 30 years. How ironic is that? This just further proves my point that Nintendo is fine. They're selling fine. They've sold over 650 million consoles. This is just proof that they're just perfectly fine in the position that they are in right now. Alright, so now I'm gone. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.